Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to The Melissa Made Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Our special guest tonight is a best-selling author of the former Chief Storytelling Officer for Success Magazine. Ooh. She teaches people how to harness the power of their stories to achieve greater success in business and beyond. Her much anticipated second book, Choose Your Story, Choose Your Life, Silence Your Inner Critic and Rewrite Your Life from the Inside Out, comes out January 11th. She is based in New York City with her husband and two beautiful children, where she secretly hopes to land a role in the Broadway musical someday. And I would bet a lot of money that that's going to happen. I'm just saying. So we're so happy to have you back, Kindra, on a teammate call. And this book, I don't know how to put into just a really short blurb of this book, but number one, if you saw my story where I talked about you had me at the Yellow Brick Road. I don't know if you know this, Kindra, but I have been a collector of Wizard of Oz memorabilia since, I've loved the movie since I was a little girl, just like you. And you guys, the story of her going and watching the musical of the Wizard of Oz is enough to buy the book. I can't tell you how much I lived through you when you told that story, but I am a huge Wizard of Oz fan. So, and it's a long time ago, I'm going to tear up. Mick and I actually had troubles in our marriage. And my mom knew that I loved the book. And so she would always tell me there's no place like home, because it was almost like I kept trying to go elsewhere to find happiness. And she's like, honey, there's no place like home. So this book, touched me because of all of the Wizard of Oz references. But above and beyond that, I also want to share with you, clear your throat, Melissa, that it's very, very, very powerful, because even just I relaunched my Made Diet, which, is a $10 ebook. And I was having a conversation with Kelly, who's on here tonight. She's my chaos coordinator, my right arm, the wind beneath my wings. And I was telling her, I struggle to share that I've revamped the book and I could put it out there. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because I'm making money off of it. And she's like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But because of your book, I started to revisit the stories that I was telling myself of why I was so scared to put my book out there and to actually make money off of it. What is wrong with that? What is the story that I'm telling myself in my head that is keeping me from proudly and boldly saying, my book is done, and I really think it's definitely worth it. And your book, of course, played a huge role in me kind of working through that and understanding why I was hesitating to do that and not, putting my best foot forward and being proud of what I have created and what I have to offer people, instead of squashing that and having that limiting belief. So you guys, I'm going to pass this over to Kindra. But if you read her first book, which I know you did, that was powerful for a business. But this book is powerful for your soul. I can't even begin to tell you how much it's going to help you if you have those moments where you're afraid of greatness or you don't feel like you're worthy of greatness, that she's going to work you through that whole process the stories that you tell yourself, which we all do. And you do, but you don't know how much you do it until you work through this book. And it's pretty mind blowing. So Kindra, thank you so much for being on here tonight and sharing with the team. I love you and appreciate you, as you can tell, and I'm going to quiet up now so I can hear from you.
Melissa, I really don't. I remember last time when we did this call together and it being so emotional and such a just hearing, because I respect you. I mean, I love you. When I get to spend, I love following you on Instagram. I love what you're doing. I love all of your stuff. I love when we got to hang out that one time. We need to do it again. But I have so much respect for you, and to hear that, because it's a very vulnerable thing, as you know, putting a book out into the world, and this even more so because this is beyond, as you said, this is beyond storytelling in business, which at the time didn't feel safe, but now looking back kind of was in its own way, right? But to hear that this is the impact it's had for you, it means so much to me. So thank you. I love this. Okay, so now that my mascara already wore off because I did a workout right before this. Is why my hair is a little greasy. It's why I'm changing my clothes and taking my hair up and down. But I figure if there was any group that would be okay with me coming on here after a workout, it was all of you. All right, so we got a little mascara that was from the sweat now and the tears. But thank you so much for having me, Melissa, and Kelly, for everything that you do. And yeah, so the book is called Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. And tonight I have a few objectives that I want to make sure that I give you during our time together, because it's holiday season and you're here. There's 100 other places you could be. So I want to make sure that your time and the fact that you are here is worth it. So definitely want to talk about how and why and what you need to know about your inner storyteller, and why it has so much power over us. And then to give you at least a taste of the 4-step method, as Melissa referred to, of how we can start choosing better stories and essentially changing our life from it. But I want to tell you, this wasn't the book that I anticipated writing next. So I wrote Stories That Stick, which is about the 4 key stories everyone needs to be able to tell in business. And my thought was, if I wrote another book, because I've always loved writing, I figured there'd be another book in the works. I thought it would be more about stories and leadership. But as I was spending more time with all of you and hearing the responses, and even just my own life, realizing that, okay, fine, there are 4 stories in business, but there is a 5th very important story. And that is the story we tell ourselves. And that you may or may not consider yourself a great storyteller in your coaching business. That might be something that you're working on. Fine. We all have room for growth. But you are, without a doubt, just by the fact that you are a human, you are an excellent storyteller right in here. And until you accept and acknowledge and then take control of that, these stories will write your life for you. And they're not always going to write you the life that you want. And so what I want to do tonight is, if nothing else, shed some light on the power of these stories. And for one example, actually, Melissa, since you are the Wizard of Oz fan, I want to share a story that's Wizard of Oz related. So, and I wasn't planning to share this because this is a very new limiting belief. How many of you have limiting beliefs? You know that you do. How many of you are working towards goals, right? And you know what you're supposed to do. You have all of the tools, you have everything, and there's something blocking you, but you've looked all around you and it's not out there. It's not, and you probably have a sense that it's somewhere in here, right? And so, and in personal development, any of this is a journey, right? And you never arrive. We're still, Melissa is extremely successful and still on a journey, right? The whole about your book. I mean, it's a journey. And I actually woke up this very morning and realized that I was telling myself stories about how I wasn't good enough, or it was a lot of comparison. Do any of you ever struggle with comparison? Like you're looking at other coaches and how, right? And it happens to all of us, right? And sometimes it's really loud, and I was noticing, because I was trying to figure out what book I wanted to read this morning, just when I had a little bit of time together. I'd call it a morning routine, but let's face it, routine, it's just like whatever happens that morning. So morning routine, I'm not always great at, but I had a couple minutes this morning. I wanted to read a book. And every author I looked at, because I have great authors on my shelf, and I was like, my book will never be that. Well, I'll never be like him. I'm never going to be. And it was all of these stories of how great these other people were and how inadequate I was. Have you had those stories? Like I don't even know these people, right? But I had all these stories about them and what those stories mean for my life. So I was sitting down in the morning, I couldn't decide on what book to read. So I sat down, and I realized that wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. And so I needed to stop those automated stories and choose a better one. And I have one of those stories. And it was actually right after I saw the play, The Wizard of Oz, that Melissa mentioned. I love Dorothy. I was obsessed with Dorothy. I went and saw the play. And afterwards, it was a really small community theater in Minnesota where I grew up. So like the Scarecrow was our chiropractor, I think, or a guy that went to our church or something. And so you could meet the actors afterwards. We're out in the lobby, and my mom knew the Scarecrow, which I thought was amazing. I'm like, how does she know this man? Like he's the Scarecrow. And the Scarecrow took one look at me. I was wearing my Dorothy outfit. I'd kind of outgrown it. So it was more like a Dorothy mini skirt than it was anything. And he said to me, "Do you want to meet Dorothy?" That would be my dream. To me, I mean, this is the epitome, like of all the authors on my shelf now, Dorothy was it for me back then. And so he picked me up, and I remember he ran me back through the back hallways of the theater. His straw was scratching my skin, and we walked up to the dressing room door, and he knocked on the door, and he said, "Dorothy, there's someone here to meet you," like in his best, Scarecrow voice. And the door opened, and there was a girl. And her hair wasn't in the, brown curls that she had blown out and done at the Emerald City. She was just in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing her blue checkered dress. She was just in a t-shirt and jeans. And there were no ruby slippers, which I was very disappointed about, by the way. She was just standing there in her sneakers. And she was just a girl, just like me. And I remember looking at her in that moment and being like, wait, like, you know how it's like when you see a teacher from elementary school at the grocery store, and you're like, you don't live at the school? Like it didn't match up to me at that moment. And then I also remember this sense of, well, if she can get to the Emerald City and she's just a normal girl, why can't I? And so this morning, now keep in mind, this is a story I wrote in the book. That story is in the book. This morning, as I'm sitting there, like thinking about I keep motioning back here because that's where they all are. All right, I'm just going to hide them. So they're here. They're all here with me. When I was comparing myself and thinking that I wasn't enough, that I was inadequate, I told myself that story. And suddenly was reminded that anytime you put someone on a pedestal, think about who you scroll through on Instagram, that they're probably just a normal girl or guy, just like you. And that one story shifted my entire morning. I ended up on a walk with Michael, and I was talking about dreaming bigger, and it was it changed my entire day, the direction my day was about to go, right? You all know which direction that day was about to go. When you start your day like that, right? You know which way it's going to go. And if we were to do that day after day after day, that's how a life changes. So that was just one example of how our life can be changed or created by the stories we tell ourselves. And that's really where I want to start, is back with the idea of this inner storyteller. All right, there's a few things that you need to know about this inner storyteller. And number one, we are programmed as humans to be storytellers. Again, you may not consider yourself a great storyteller on Instagram or as you're building your coaching at business, but in your own mind, you are a great storyteller. It's programmed in you as part of our survival. We use stories outwardly to make sense and communicate within our tribes, but we use the stories internally to keep us safe, to know what our own personal boundaries were. Because here's the thing, if you stepped out of line back in caveman days and you did something that appeared to be outside of what the rest of the tribe wanted to do, or you were taking they would kick you out. You would die. Okay. And so these stories about what is allowed and what we can and cannot do is a natural programming that we have. It is completely automated. It's as automatic as breath and as blood flow. But what have we learned about breath and blood flow? How many of you watch your heart rate when you exercise? Or do you have your Aura ring where you're watching your heart rate at night? I know, I can't help. This is not an ad, okay? But I can tell, like if I'm watching my heart rate and I know I can optimize my body if I'm paying attention to this otherwise automated thing. How many of you have ever done breath work, like for meditation? Or if you haven't done it, you've at least heard about it. I would fall into that second category, right? Now, these are automated processes, but we know now that if we optimize them, if we pay attention to them, we make them uninvisible, which would also be called visible, big changes can happen in our lives. And the same is true for our stories. Now, here's the other thing you need to know about the stories. We have a negativity bias. And that was designed, again, to keep us safe. If there's a rustle in the bushes, caveman days, it is better for you to think that it is a hungry lion than it is for you to think that it is a beautiful summer breeze, right? Like it's like, hey, we got it now. The threats in modern day life are much different. They're not life or death, but our body responds in the same way. Think about this. How many of you have an iPhone and sometimes you open it up and you accidentally swipe such that the Apple News comes up? Does this happen to anybody else, or is this just my right? And you're like, and there are all the headlines. Now, I'm not a huge news person. I just know better. I can lose hours of my life and I don't want to spend my hours there. That's just my personal choice. So I accidentally swiped the wrong direction. And there are so many headlines there that all it is one word, found. Well, obviously, if the word is found, it's a body. I know how these headlines are written. And what do? I'm like, ooh, tell me about this. I can't help myself. None of us can. This is because how many of you have ever posted something on social media and you have all of these comments of support or messages, and then there's that one, and maybe the one isn't even that bad, but maybe it's like, meh. What is the comment you remember? I am embarrassed. I could read back to you the mean comments that I have received in my life. One was so silly. I was taking video of like arriving at my family's cabin, and it was just there for fun. And I like scrolled and was like, we made it. And this guy wrote in there, glad to hear it, like with this tone, like we needed to. Why do I remember that? Plus, it was a guy who was a disgusting ex-boyfriend, if you can even call him that. And I'm like, oh, you were having any part in my life. Like 15 years, 20 years ago. Like, what is this? But again, that is our negativity bias. So know that when it comes to your brain choosing what stories to tell, it's gonna tell you the bad ones without you even realizing it. That's just that's what it's made to do. That's what it's there for. All right. And if you just let it go, and then here's the last thing, and it kind of goes with the automation, but these stories are almost entirely invisible. But that doesn't mean that they aren't there. All right. Again, there's moments that you can stop during your day and ask yourself, what's like, you know how you push play on your workouts? At some point, like whether it's like you get to have a water break or something, I know, you don't necessarily want to push pause, but somewhere in the middle of your workout, do a story check. Do a story check. What are you saying to yourself during that workout? I was on like workout number 1 or 2 of 21 day fix real time. Is that, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is the last burpee I'm going to do. I never follow through with that. I did swear at Autumn a little bit. I do that, right? But I did a little pause, like we were taking a water break. And I said to myself, really, how do I expect that I'm going to be able to make it through this program, let alone this workout, if these are the stories that are on repeat in my mind? Like it was disgusting. So here's how these invisible stories are able to really control our lives. Okay. When you think about how life happens, we often think that it happens in a really straight line, which I'm not saying that that isn't true, but that there's an event, we respond to it, and then we get our results. And this just happens over and over and over and over. So let's say your alarm goes off, that's the event, or you know that you're supposed to follow up with someone, or you're supposed to reach out, or you're supposed to whatever it is, you're supposed to go to the grocery store. The event happens, you respond a certain way. You hit snooze, you sleep through your workout, and then you get your result, which compounds over time to a result you probably don't want, okay? Or the event, you set your alarm, the alarm goes off, you get up, you do your workout, and that has a trajectory for your life. And so what we often do when we go to try to make changes in our lives is we go straight to the behavior, right? We try to manipulate the behavior. We lay out the clothes in advance, and we have all these strategies, right, that help us with the behavior. And some of them work, and sometimes we can sustain for a period of time. But how many of you have ever fallen off the proverbial wagon, right? That's because we miss a key moment in this process of how our lives are created. It's this almost imperceptible slice of time between the event and our response. And it is in that slice of time that all of our stories live. And they just play right back to you without you even knowing it. And then you decide how to respond. But based on the stories you're telling yourself, that response is either going to serve you or not, right? Can you picture this like slice of time? So let's say you see a beautiful person at a bar or across the grocery store or whatever. I mean, now I'm thinking about all the beautiful people I used to see at grocery stores, and I'd be like, hello. But then so that's the event, beautiful person, you're looking for a relationship, maybe you should strike up a conversation. But then in this imperceptible slice of time, you think back to that time you wrote a note to the kid in 2nd grade and said, circle yes or no if you like me. How many of you can picture that scenario, whatever it looked like for you, right? And maybe they just crumpled up the note and threw it back at you, right? You remember that school dance where you were just standing up against the wall and no one came to ask you to dance. All of these stories. How many of you can remember, like picture it very clearly, like an elementary school mini trauma? Like you're the person who slighted you. Can you even remember their first and last name? right? Like these are how our stories live in us. And so you don't approach the person and then you're still looking for love. We can choose what stories we tell ourselves in that slice of time. So what I want to do now is give you kind of an overview of the 4 steps that I outline in the book. How many of you don't want to wait for 2022? Right? Like I'm ready. Like I am definitely in the mode. Today is December 1st. Let's go now. Right? And so I want you to be able to walk away from this with strategies for starting better stories tonight. So what I'm going to do is outline the 4-step process. I'll tell you what each one is. And then there's one that I want to dive deep on, but I'll talk about each of them a little bit. Okay, here they are. Catch is the first step. You have to catch these stories in the act. Okay, which remember is a little tricky to do because they kind of scurry around in your subconscious and you don't even know that they're there. So catching is step number 1. Analyzing these stories is step number 2. Choosing a different story. This is really the action step, step number 3. And finally, installing your chosen story. So since we're here, installing it, essentially what we're trying to do is rewire the automation to plug in our chosen stories and put them on repeat until, and you know, like any time you're trying to build a new habit, it takes intentional effort to get this new habit into place. That's what installing these new stories is about. Until your brain automatically, when you feel that fight or flight, when you feel that limiting belief creeping in, your brain knows exactly what to do. Oh, I tell myself these stories, and I don't spiral down. All right. So that was the 4th step. Let's go back up to step number 1, which is catch. And actually, that's really what we've been talking about here right now. Some of the easiest ways to catch your stories are in your limiting beliefs, those I am statements that you have that are holding you back. And what I want you to do actually right now is type in the chat if you're brave enough to do so, but this is a good group, so I think you're safe here. A limiting belief that you think is keeping you from whatever it is, in whatever area of your life. Maybe it's health and well-being. Maybe it's money. Melissa was talking about money stories. Maybe it's in your business, in your career here. Raise your hand if you've ever felt that. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm useless. I'm not good enough to run a business. I'm too old. I mean, first of all, know that you're not alone. We did a big survey. I am not enough was, there it is. Was the number 1 response. Look at like what our friends and these powerful women and men who we love and adore are carrying around and thinking about themselves on a daily basis. Like, isn't it, when you see that, doesn't it make you go, wait, why? Why do we believe this why do we believe these things about ourselves? So anytime you catch yourself saying something like this, that's an indicator that there are stories there. Another thing that you can look at is anytime you're procrastinating. Who here is a procrastinator? There are stories in there, right? Those are fear-based stories, fear of failure, fear of, if you're dealing with some perfection. Anytime you sense yourself procrastinating, there's a story there. Even Melissa, who's holding herself back and she knows it, that means there are stories there. So that's step 1, catching it. Okay, so that's how you catch it. Number 2 is to analyze the stories. Now, Melissa mentioned this as she was talking about it. She's like, wait a minute, I just said, well, I feel uncomfortable with the fact of promoting this new book because I'm going to make money. She caught it and was like, hold on a second. What's that about? Like, she knows that she wants to share this message, and she absolutely should. Money is often tied to that. This story is holding her back. It's not going to allow her to achieve her ultimate goal, which is to share this incredible program that she's created, right? That's when you know it's time to go deeper and see what stories are there. And you will be shocked. Melissa, I'm sure you will be shocked at the things that you find. Very specific, very old, sometimes well-intentioned stories, or sometimes stories that served you at one point in your life but are now obsolete. Now, here's something I want to tell you. This entire step, analyzing your stories and what you're up against, you have affirmations, which I think are great. Vision boards, those are all very effective strategies. But sometimes it's like, I love money. I am a magnet for money, right? And it would be like if the Titanic crew came up against this iceberg and was like, oh, I'm just gonna light a match and throw it at it and see if that melts it. That's what an affirmation does. You have an iceberg worth of old stories. Now, when you pre-order the book, one of the bonuses is an entire course that outlines, and Melissa, you'll remember the 6 key questions you need to ask yourself to thoroughly analyze these stories and get a grasp on them, and know, not to ruminate, but to know what you're up against so you know how to move forward. And in the process of analyzing, there's a lot of forgiveness, wouldn't you say, Melissa? There's a lot of grace. There's a lot of appreciation and wonder. And it's a really important step in the path to moving forward. And there's a whole course on that. Okay. So I talked about install, which is the 4th step. What I want to talk a little bit more about right now is the act of choosing better stories. And I will say it was a little bit like uncomfortable for me because it just sounded so simple, right? Like if you're telling yourself bad stories, then tell yourself better stories. That would be a very short book. However, when I started to feel, here is just a side note. This is my story in action. When I started to feel insecure, imposter syndrome about that, right? I just told myself this story of Mel Robbins, and she wrote a whole book about high-fiving yourself in a mirror. That's really simple too. And it's amazing. And it's like, so I was like, I am going to use that as inspiration. Like people all across the world are high-fiving themselves in the mirror. They're living better lives as a result. I'm going to say, choose a better story. And I do want to point out something. So you can see the title says, choose your story, change your life. And there was a moment where I was debating, or there was some talk. I knew what I wanted, but the publisher was like, what about change your story, change your life? And this is not about changing your stories. Like, how many of you have had some really hard stories? Some really big pains. And it would be irresponsible of me and inaccurate to say, oh, well, just change those. This is not about, you can't change it. It happened. But what you can do is choose to tell yourself automated stories, like automate stories that serve you in the direction that you want to go. Because the other thing to remember is we often, we're very concerned with size of story, okay? And so we think if really big, bad things have happened to us, that they're just too big to ever overcome. But some of the smallest stories can move us forward. Like moments of joy happen in very small moments. Feelings of mattering to someone, or being seen, or feeling like we are enough happen in these teeny tiny glimpses. And sometimes just one, I'll tell you one. Here's one that's kind of silly, just to show you how silly it can be. I was at spin class. I love spin. I'm so excited that you guys have a bike. That's amazing. I was at spin class. The spin instructor is kind of this like little spin celebrity too. And she was like, blah, blah, blah. When I speak to thousands of people And she was like kind of bragging about speaking to thousands of people. And I'm just riding along like, I speak to thousands of people too. I didn't really, it wasn't like raise your hand if you speak to thousands of people, but I was like, oh, I speak to thousands of people too. No big deal. It was just my own thought. The next day, there was this random guy that I've kind of become friends with. We have mutual friends. He knows that I'm a mom and my kids, whatever. And he was like, hey, I just have to tell you something. Because I had given him my Instagram. And he was like, when the instructor said like, oh, I speak to thousands of people, and she was acting like no one else in the room did, he's like, I think I know someone else who speaks for thousands of people. And then he just like walked away. And I felt seen. And it was just in this really small comment. And I know now that we all need, especially in the world that we're in, we all need that kind of story ammunition. Those moments where we feel worthy, where we feel valuable, where we feel like we matter. And so maybe it is just an Instagram comment or someone that said, wow, I was not going to work out today, but you posted that video and so I did. How did that make you feel? Did that make you feel good? Did that make you feel like you matter? Hang on to that story and you can choose to tell it to yourself. Okay. I want to be now respectful of your time. So I want to give you 3 quick strategies on how you can choose better stories so you can start applying these. All right. So the first strategy, there's 3 that I'll share: replace, reroute, research. So the first one is replace, and that is the most straightforward of them all. If your limiting belief is that, you'll never be successful in this business, then choose a story of when you were successful in a different business role. Like it really can be. I struggled for a long time, and I share this story in the book with the limiting belief, the story that was holding me back. It was making me worse at my job, and it was siphoning off my joy. And that was that I was a terrible mother, that I was not serving my children, that I just was failing them because I was pursuing another dream at the same time, which is to be with all of you, right? And so I would have all of the stories on repeat of the time that they were the last ones to be picked up, or the time there was a birthday party and I sent out the invitation, but I forgot to check for the RSVPs and nobody got the invitation. And so 15 minutes in the party, nobody was there. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I called all the neighbor kids and it turned out great. She was only 3 years old. It wasn't a big deal, right? Like this is, and I'm allowed to learn. I'm allowed to mess up. The story of when the kids were supposed to bring, my daughter was supposed to bring a sugar pumpkin to class. It's these little mini pumpkins, but I didn't think about it until the last minute. And so all the sugar pumpkins were sold out. And I was like going to make her lug around this big, like 20-pound pumpkin. All of these stories, very vividly, by the way, replaying in my mind constantly and on repeat, invisibly. I didn't even know they were there until I started catching them. And then there was a moment where I said, enough is enough. What are the stories of when I've been a great mother? I am going to actively choose to tell myself those stories. And they, again, happen in very small moments. There was a time one of my kids' preschool teachers pulled me to the side and said, your child is so compassionate. You are doing something so right as parents. There was the time that I only got to go on one field trip, and then the teacher would just email me in advance because I was so good on that one field trip. Anytime there was a field trip, to see if I was going to be available to be on the field trip because she wanted me to be there. Like these are, and then there's a big story that I share in the book, which actually, chapter 3, I don't name the company. Okay, you'll know, I talk about like this huge opportunity. So I decided to replace the I'm a bad mom stories with stories of being a good mom. Really simple, really effective. The second strategy is rerouting. So it's taking something from a different area of your life and applying it here. Okay, so maybe you're telling yourself, maybe one of your limiting beliefs is that you're just not a salesperson, or you can't do, you can't do this business. No one will follow you. You don't have any, and that you're not good at sales, which whether or not this is sales is a whole different topic. So what's a different area of your life? Because really what you are doing here is creating community, right? And have you created community in other areas of your life? Are you in charge of a big volunteer fundraiser effort? Were you, on student council and you were the one that got everybody together to go cheer at the basketball game? Or so take something from a different area of your life and apply it here. Maybe you have a goal to lose 50 pounds, but you've never lost 50 pounds before. So if you're like, I want to lose 50 pounds, but I don't have stories about losing 50 pounds. Well, what does that take? It takes discipline. It takes sacrifice. So what are other areas of your life where you've exhibited discipline and sacrifice? Maybe you had to care for an ailing relative. That takes a lot of sacrifice. And if you can sacrifice there, you can sacrifice here. And the last one is to research, to use other people's stories as inspiration for your own. And that's what I did with Mel Robbins. When I was like, oh gosh, just choose a better story seems so simple. And so like, I'm really telling people that this can change their lives. I know it can. And then I was watching Mel Robbins just like explode, telling people to high five themselves in the mirror. And I realized that, you know what, that's actually what people need, is really simple strategies for a better life, day-to-day things that they can just do right now. And so I used her story as inspiration for my own to alleviate some of those negative stories that I have. Here's the one warning that I will give you about that. And that is you have to be very careful, because that is a relationship that using someone else's story as inspiration is a relationship that can turn sour. If I had started watching Mel and being like, well, turning her into Dorothy, right? Well, Mel can do that because she's got talents that I don't have and she has, then that's a signal to me that that story is no, I got to let that story go. I got to find a different story. Okay. That's up to you. And you can feel it, right? You can feel when a story is making you feel better, and you can feel when there's a story that's starting to go sour. Like when you pour cream in your coffee, but not until after you're done intermittent fasting and it comes out clumpy. Okay. Then you're like, yeah, this story isn't serving me. This story isn't serving me anymore. So those are 3 examples for choosing a better story. There are more in the book. I think the thing that I would leave you with right now is first, I should tell you. So if you do pre-order, I told you about the course that's, do you like how, is the course that's the bonus. But then the other thing you get is I do live trainings every Monday where I tackle these limiting beliefs that you see, that you've actually all printed right there in the chat. A few of them we've already addressed. I'm not good enough. I did a whole live training on the stories you need to find that can help you make progress past those old stories. We just did fear of failure. And next week is imposter syndrome and confidence, Monday. So you can be in on that live training by pre-ordering, and then you'll get all the information. But here's the thing that I would leave you with. And I mentioned this earlier, but now that you know the power that these stories have, I want you to be looking for them. Set an alarm on your phone at some random time in the day and stop and do a story check. What stories am I telling myself? And then know that if you are in a difficult time right now, because this time still isn't easy, that sometimes the most important thing to do is remember that you're in the middle of a story. And the middles of stories are by nature messy and confusing and sometimes hard to get. How many of you like want to skip through to the end of that? If you're watching the movie on the screen at home and you pause and you read the rest of the story on like Wikipedia or whatever, and you're like, okay, good, because you want, and we also have a habit of we like periods. We like stories to end. We like to have them be done. And I just want to remind you that you really are the author here. And so if you're in a weird place that you don't like right now, it's probably just a middle, and it's supposed to feel like that. And B, you get to decide when it ends. And you get to decide if it doesn't end until it's the ending you want. So I just want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this in such a raw, like, I hope you can tell that this is just for you. And I'm really excited to see what can happen next with the stories you tell yourself. So thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. I'm not done with you yet, though. So first and foremost, you guys have to let Beachbody know that you would love to see Kindra back at Summit or Leadership or New Leader Conference, wherever you will attend. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Kindra, before I let you go, because one of the really powerful parts of the book for me is confirmation bias. And I think that we all, because, myself, I will talk about other really successful coaches in the business, follow them and learn from them. And then there comes that, just like you mentioned in the book where, the teachers were told that these students were gifted, even if they weren't, that you just have that, that confirmation bias that, they are better than me. They are more talented than me. They are more beautiful than me. They are better business people than me, that I'm afraid that, sometimes, my coaches, any coach in Beachbody watches these, successful coaches and is like, I don't have those skills. I don't have that talent. I don't have that upbringing, whatever it is. If there's just anything story-wise that you can share to help people through that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think that it goes back to that, and you can borrow my Dorothy story. Like, we can never know unless you really know the person, like unless they are actually your friend, like unless you're the person that they call when they had a disappointment, or like, and it's not saying, and I'm not saying that we all need to air all of our failures, because for many of the most successful people, part of the reason they are successful is because they don't spend a lot of time there, right? Mm-hmm. They see it as a failure. They see it as a middle of the story, and they get on with writing the rest of it. That to know that for every success story you see, there are big parts of their story that you're not seeing, and you just have to be okay with that. Like, I'll tell you today, like I was just thinking, even today, I had a call with my team, we're launching the book, and there's, all these things are happening. And then they said, oh yeah, we got passed over. Like, we pitched the Today Show, which, wouldn't that be amazing? And they passed, but well, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not gonna, it was just like but I was like, oh, the Today Show passed? Like, that sucks. And then, but so the Today Show passed, right? So know that, like, if you're looking at me, they saw this and we're like, no. And that hurts me, right? That hurts. And then, but then I went immediately to, well, who else do I know at the Today Show? Like, I'm going to make the Today Show, I'm going to go on GMA and then have the Today Show calling and being like, oh, we're sorry. We're sorry about that. Now, I don't know if that fully answers your question about confirmation bias, but I think that things aren't always what they seem. Yeah. And the only truest thing you can know, and that's when, Melissa, you said, there's no place like home. Mm-hmm. And kind of the whole, there's, the Wizard of Oz theme woven throughout. The only thing you can really know is right in here. You know all your stories, and your stories are all you need to know. That's all you need to know. So when you start looking out there for confirmation bias of your own, like all you need to know is what's right here.
Yeah. I will end this by just totally reiterating what you just said, because Steve, who's my little marketing guy, has convinced me, and nobody knows, it's the first time I'm mentioning it, to do a podcast. And so I have been reaching out to people, authors and stuff, especially that are into intermittent fasting and stuff like that. And so of course I reached out to Dr. Jason Fung, who is, huge in intermittent fasting. And the reply was, he's not interested. And it crushed me, just like it did you. Crushed me, because he's the guru. And I thought to myself, instead of feeling defeated or, I'm not good enough, I changed the narrative in my head that I'm going to show him that he is very interested in being in my podcast at some point in time.
You did it right there, though. That's one of the, that's one is to say, oh, this is an interesting middle. Like, how fun is it going to be to tell this story later on when it 100%. Comes all the way back around? Like that there's so much freedom in seeing your life like that. Yes,
Marissa, total plot twist. That's, I think that's just the, that's the tenacity of an entrepreneur, is someone who sometimes does get that, that slap in the face, literal slap in the face, and you can go one or two ways. And it is 100% the stories that you tell yourself. And reading the book, I know just this little tiny short little call that we did with Kindra, it has been a huge aha moment for you, but to go through the whole book and to really realize what is going on in your mind when you're trying to do great things, whether it's raise children, have a happy marriage, build a business, get in shape. All of your examples. She goes from relationships to your health to business. She covers it all. And it's quite mind-blowing when you realize the stories that you're telling yourself. So Kindra, you're amazing. You're just amazing.
So much. Thank you. I was nervous. Of course, I'm like, I wonder if Melissa's gonna like it. She's reading it. So that I feel so good.
Thank you, Kindra. Does it sound like that you're going to be doing a book tour?
I don't know. I did we're going to have a virtual launch party on the Monday night beforehand. So for all of you pre-ordered, we're mailing you a little package. Can I tell you one of the things that's I don't want to tell you, but we have it's a little thing, a little kit, so you can be there for the virtual party.
How cute.
We're not sure yet if we're going to do, not because of any restrictions or anything, but that was just a beast of a thing. So we'll keep you updated. I'll let you know as I travel around, and maybe I can just meet people at restaurants or coffee shops or hotel lobbies or whatever it is. Yeah.
That would be a blast. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. Here you go. This is it. You got 31 days. You got a head start. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You guys have a fantastic night. Thank you, Kindra. Go get that book, please.
Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister. And until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.